And Woike is the NBA writer for the LA Times, national NBA writer for the LA Times, also covering the Clippers in the bubble. And he joins us now. Dan, good morning. How are you? How's morale?
It's okay on my end, Dan. I think guys were happy to be back on the court in the last 24, 48 hours. I think there was a little sense of relief, and then I think a feeling that of refocus, and ultimately, I think that a sense of mental fatigue that kind of went away a little bit. Players and coaches all talked about that, and sort of in that strike period, that it was in addition to obviously refocusing on the social justice initiatives, to also just kind of take a step back, because the guys that have been here for 7-8 weeks have been going either every day or every other day with games and practices, and that's a lot of work. And I think people needed to breathe a little bit.
What did you make of what Paul George had to say about kind of being in a bad spot in the bubble?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's what I've heard from other players. It's what I heard from players on the way in. I've heard from team psychologists and different staff saying that they thought that would be an area of competitive advantage. If you can be the team that figures out the best way to kind of crack that code and keep players engaged in a situation where, the typical, the pieces in your life that you usually go to for perspective, whether it's your friends, your family, your children, a great meal, all of that different stuff, it's gone. Like, you have to reestablish all of these different routines and everything like that here, because the rules are completely different. You're isolated, less isolated now as families are starting to kind of move in. But it was a grind for a lot of players. And I think especially if you have a bad day, there's not a whole lot to do other than just kind of look at your phone and stare at the mentions. And I think that's something that certainly happened to Paul George.
What did you learn from the Clippers this past series against the Mavs?
Kawhi Leonard is a beast. And I think we should know this, right? Obviously, but it's funny. You watch that Clipper team over the course of the season, and the season feels like it's been like 4 years long. But the big kind of complaint about the Clippers all along is like, okay, this team is building big picture, big picture, big picture. When are they going to take on the little picture? Like, will they be ready when that moment comes? And I think particularly in Game 4 against the Mavs, when they blow that 20-point lead, you're like, are they too casual? Is that who this team is? Like, did they reach for the light switch and it wasn't there? That's not going to – I think we should trust Kawhi Leonard. I think he knows what he's doing. For all the talk about how great Luka was in that series, I mean, the Kawhi numbers, Dan, if you just look at them, it's, 54% from the field. I mean, Kawhi didn't shoot 30% from three in this series. He was still 50%, 54% from the field, 10 rebounds, 5 assists, 33 points a game. Never had a game under 29 points, like just 29 to 36 points every game. Playing good defense. Like, this is a dude that I think we should trust.
I don't worry about him. It's everybody else that I don't know who's going to be consistent, where Paul George can reappear and then disappear as well. I don't know about the role players here. I don't know. There's a little bit more fragility to the Clippers than I think that we want to acknowledge. We look at the Lakers because it's in vogue to go, hey, let's talk about all the Laker problems. The Clippers are probably a better team than the Lakers. It's just you have LeBron and Anthony Davis who would cancel out Paul George and Kawhi.
Yeah, Dan, I'll try out this example that I've been using, I think, since the first month of the season. I've always felt like the Lakers are like the $100 bill that you have in your pocket. You can go take that somewhere, you spend it. I think you know exactly what it is. And the Clippers are $100 in stock. It's not quite as tangible. You're like, maybe it'll be worth something way more down the line, or it could go belly up because we don't know, right? Injuries have completely adjusted. I mean, I think this is a team that's still played less than 20 games together with its core. Injuries have blown all of that out. You can look at this series and say, man, Montrezl Harrell was really disappointing. And he was, right? For a guy who's going to be sixth man of the year. He also hadn't played basketball in like over 2 weeks before the first game of the playoffs, and they just dropped him in and played him. You had Patrick Beverley not on the court. You had Lou Williams still working back from, leaving the bubble. I think it is interesting. It's like, on one hand, like, they've been able to survive all this stuff, and it's pretty remarkable that they were the second seed in the West despite being as banged up as they were. And it speaks to their overall level of talent. But you're right. It does feel like there's something lacking, something that's not quite as tangible with them. And it's tricky. They're going to lose Marcus Morris, Dan, at some point here. Not well, he may get suspended down the line too, but he's going to leave the bubble at some point to be with his family for the birth of a child. Who knows what else is going to happen. I will say, though, I do think in this series, I think 3 role players in particular showed real promise. Ivica Zubac is a good player.
Yeah.
Like, that guy is a good center, not just put him out there and, hopefully he gets out of the way kind of guy. No, he was very valuable. I still think Lou Williams is a guy that it's just like he can get to the basket or draw a foul at any time he wants to. And Landry Shamet is an interesting player in the sense, one of the guys that they got last year when they traded Tobias Harris at the deadline, a second-year player, was really good in the playoffs last year. Did something very difficult this season, Dan. He took a step backwards. I think this hurt Boston actually last year. When you've got a bunch of young players ascending, and then all of a sudden you say, okay, your role is going to diminish drastically. That's hard. That's not usually how it works for young players, right? You keep getting more and more responsibility each season. Landry Shamet had his responsibility cut this year. Less shots, less minutes. With Patrick Beverley down, the big adjustment that Doc Rivers made in this series, we put Landry Shamet, not Reggie Jackson, in that starting lineup, and he played pretty well.
We're talking to Dan Woike. He is a national NBA writer for the LA Times and covering the Clippers in the bubble. Do you know Kawhi Leonard?
I mean, as much as you can, being around him I was, around Toronto, I would say, for 20 games last year, and then, being around him this year. I mean, we've spoken. I've seen him smile a few times. I've seen him laugh. But
does he care about being a star, Dan?
I mean, I think certainly to a certain extent, right? Like
or famous, maybe that's a better word.
Yeah, I don't think the famous part. I mean, look, I think he wants the power and sort of the clout that comes with being the level of player he is, right? Like he is going to set the tone for the team that he is on, right? When you're a great player and you're dealing with what he's dealing with physically, right? Like this mysterious sort of leg injury that is going to keep him from playing back-to-backs and probably for the rest of his career, unless there's some sort of surgery or something down the line. That doesn't always sit well around teams when you've got guys playing through ankle sprains, playing through different injuries, when you're having a guy take maintenance days, right? Like this was not super easy in Toronto. It ruffled feathers there. It ruffled feathers in the Clippers locker room, I think. But he's earned sort of the right to do it. And it's sort of to say, I think he wants to be like, no, like you're going to trust me. Like my way is going to work. That's why I kind of would go back to that, like fall in line behind me and like, you're going to do that. I think that matters to him. Obviously winning, tremendously important to him. Family is very important to him. A big part of the reason why he ended up in a Clipper uniform was to be back in Los Angeles. But, it's hard to crack. You heard kind of out of the bubble meetings and stuff that Kawhi Leonard was somebody who stood up and spoke, which is, a real eye-opening thing. It's hard to imagine, in a room with LeBron James and some of the other more high-profile players in this league that Kawhi Leonard would be a voice that would be notable. But I think that's sort of the power in being the quiet guy, right? Is once you say something, it carries more weight.
If I said we were betting lunch, Lakers or Clippers playing for the title, who would you pick?
I still trust LeBron James. I think ultimately to figure it out, but how expensive a lunch are we talking? I think that's
In-N-Out burger.
Okay. In that case, I can be a little more bold. I think the Clippers are the better team. I agree with you. I think they have a better roster up and down. I think they have more talent, and talent usually wins out in a series. It's so close because every time the Lakers step on the court, they might have the 2 best players. And that's just, that can be true in virtually any series. And it's such an advantage, Dan.
Good to talk to you, Dan. And good luck the rest of the way in the bubble. And we'd love to reach out to you again.
All right, let's do it.
Thank you, Dan. That's Dan Woike. He covers the NBA for the LA Times and in particular the Clippers in the bubble.